I had rain on the forecast last night, so I didn't feed the animals last night. I gave them a lot of food in the morning, and then I just kind of, I didn't give them food in the evening. And they had a bit of food left over. They had a bit of food left over yesterday, and so I was like, you know what, whatever. I'm just gonna leave them to it because I don't want to, have to throw away a bunch of food. If the food gets wet, if it gets real wet, I'll have to throw it away. And so I didn't feed them, and so all of the animals are up here eating this morning. So if you want to take a look at what the animals look like, this is this is a good opportunity to do so. All right, this is what the animals look like. And I got and I've been saying that these animals, I do have a couple of smaller ones. That is one of the smaller ones right there. And I do have about two that are that size. I have a Brayford animal over here, a small Brayford animal over here that about that size. But if you take a look at the rest of them, you can tell that they're all about the same size, right? I got, they're all about the same size. They're all about the same size. You can take a look at them. They're all about the same size. This one is a little bit smaller just because he had that infection, and when he had that infection, he lost weight. But the rest of them, there's the other small Brayford animal right there. So I do have about two animals that are that size, but I also have two animals that are a bit bigger than the rest of them. Like that one's a bit bigger than the rest of them. And so all in all, it all just evens out. And so, okay. And so I actually ran calculations for the average weight of my herd, and I got the formula. And, and this is one way to do it. This is another way to do it, right? I talk about one of the ways to appraise the value of a herd is to it's a lot easier, right? It is a lot simpler. Like if I go to the sale barn, let's say that I go to the sale barn and I sell 5 of my cattle. If I sell 5 of my cattle and I have 30 cattle left at home, right? If I have 30 cattle left at home and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, it's time for me to take some leverage. I want to take some leverage against my assets, right? The most simple way to do it is when I am sitting at the sale barn, I take a look at how much money I make when I'm at the sale barn that day, and then I just multiply it by 2, right? It's very simple to do that, right? It's the most simple, most realistic way to do that. And if I sell 5 animals and I make enough money to buy 10, right? If I sell 5 animals, I still have 30 animals at home, right? I still have 30 animals at home. I sold 5 and I made enough money to buy 10, and I am looking to take a loan against my assets, right? I am looking to take leverage against my assets. If I am looking to take leverage against my assets and I'm sitting there and I have a check in my hand and I still have animals at home, I just take the number on the check and I multiply it by 2, right? It's very simple to do it like that. There is another way to leverage against an asset, to leverage against the balance sheet. And there is a time and a place for this, especially, all right, like right now, right now I'm just sitting here collecting money, right? I'm effectively sitting here collecting money. This is not an ideal situation, all right? This is not an ideal situation. You do not, I've always said that the whole thing, it is just sitting here collecting, because here's the thing, the money's not going to do anything. All right, the money's not going to do anything, and just sitting here collecting money, number one, I'm going to be taxed very heavily. All right, I am going to be taxed very heavily, and the money does not do anything. All right, once you start making about 30, and I've always, and I don't exactly know how many people on the planet make $40,000 a month. But I will tell you from my perspective, I make about $40,000 a month, and the money does not do anything. You legitimately, after a certain point, you can't even do anything with it. You can't. All right, and realistically, after about $15,000 a month, granted that you're not an idiot, the price of everything is borderline just whatever. Like, and here's a very realistic way to look at it. At about, when you start bringing home about $15,000 a month, from what I have seen, when you start bringing home when I started bringing home about $15,000 a month, everything just became, the price of everything just became whatever. My bills became negligible. All right. It doesn't, the price, and here's, I would almost guarantee, and granted that you're not an idiot, if you bring home $15,000 a month, and you live on $10,000 and you put $5,000 worth of your income into the S&P 500, you are not going to care what the price of the S&P 500 is. I guarantee it. And as long as you budget your money, right? If you sit there and you intentionally live on $10,000 a month, if you intentionally do that and you invest $5,000 a month, number one, you can effectively do anything, all right? You can effectively do anything, all right? The $10,000 a month, it will buy you a nice apartment. It will buy you a nice car. It will buy you all the food that, you know, it will you know, keep your fridge full of food, right? You can pay for all of your bills. Granted that you're not an idiot, $10,000 a month will effectively buy you everything. And then if you just sit there and you think, well, I make $15,000 a month, I'm just going to put $5,000 into the S&P every month. You are not going to care what the price of the S&P is. You won't. You know, it would be more important that you fundamentally understood what you were investing in. Right? I've always talked about the big idea is you need to understand your investment. You need to understand your investment, all right? If you don't understand your investment, then don't invest in it. All right, because at the end of the day, you know, you have to there are a lot of investments that you can have. There are many investments, right? I mean, you can invest in the S&P 500. You can invest in commercial real estate. You can invest in businesses. You can invest in commodities. You can invest in dividend stocks. There are a lot of options here, right? There are many things that you can invest in. But if you do not understand your investment, then don't invest in it. All right? You know, but that's the whole, but I guarantee it, you know, and I've been talking about this and you know, the whole thing about my situation, right? And I talk about this. You know how easy it is for me to make 100 grand? And I'm not going to say I'm not for me. All right. Because you have to understand that I legitimately worked on this thing every single day for the last 15 years of my life. I make an astronomical sum of money. And, you know, and it's like, if we're going to talk about a very small amount of money, like 100 grand, I can make 100 grand. If I had 5 grand, I could turn that 5 grand into 100 grand in a year. You know, and I would do it with a 100% guarantee. If I lost my 5 grand, I would just go and make another 5 grand and try it again. Right? It's not like, oh my God, 5 grand, I lost 5 grand, I can't believe it. Oh my God, everything's falling apart. It doesn't matter. 5 grand is whatever. If I had 5 grand, and I've already told you exactly what I would do with 5 grand, right? I would take my 5 grand and I would go to the bank and take a loan for another 5 grand. That gives me 10 grand. What can I realistically do with 10 grand? Well, I can buy 9 or 10 cattle. I can buy 1.5 tonnages of fertilizer. Right, I can buy about a tonnage of fertilizer. I can buy all the medication, and I can get myself a lease property. I could do all of that with 10 grand. Right, it's not that big, you know, and I could turn 5 grand into 100 grand very quickly, and I would do it with a 100% guarantee. All right, you know, you have to understand that, you know, and I've always said, you know, the whole thing about it is, you know, when you know, in terms of like, you know, in terms of the amount of money that I make. And I've already even been talking about this. The amount of money that I'm making is actually going upwards on an exponential scale. It is going up vertically. All right, the amount of money that I'm making is going up vertically. I would actually anticipate that when I take the earnings of my business and I reinvest my earnings, just my earnings, and take no leverage over the next 3-4 months, I will generate enough money. I will generate enough money to grow my balance sheet by more than 50%. I would be, you know, that is what I legitimately see happening, okay? That is what I see happening. And it might even be 75%. All right, you know, the amount of money that I'm making is going astronomically higher. And this is also something I talk about, you know, when, you know, the whole thing about the money is that after a certain point, the money does not do anything. You cannot do anything with the money. It becomes borderline impossible to spend the money. Like if I were to go out right now, granted that I didn't go and do something idiotic like go to a casino, granted that I didn't do something idiotic like go and, you know, start doing drugs, granted that I did not go and do something idiotic like buy, you know, 5 Lamborghinis. And buying 5 Lamborghinis, I mean, it doesn't, you know, if you have $150 million and you buy 5 Lamborghinis, then it doesn't matter. I'm saying, would I buy 5 Lamborghinis? My net worth is probably somewhere between $3 and $5 million, all right? My net worth is probably between $3 and $5 million. I wouldn't even buy one Lamborghini. I wouldn't do it. I understand that I probably make about $40,000 a month. I probably do, okay? And I still would not buy myself a Lamborghini. I still wouldn't do it. It's not a good idea. What am I going to do with the money, right? What's the big idea? What should I do with the money? What am I going to do with the money? I will grow my business with it. That's it. That's the only way for me to use this money. And to put things in perspective, right? Like if I go, there is legitimately like zero other things that I can do with the money. All right. If I don't do that, what's going to happen? The money will just sit in my account. The money will just sit in my account and it won't do anything. It will not do anything. Money does not do anything. Right? This is I've always said that cash is not a phenomenal asset. It is a good asset. You should have some cash. Cash is a good asset, but it is not a phenomenal asset. It is not phenomenal. All right. It's not like you have some incredible asset because you have some cash. Cash doesn't do anything. All right, cash does not do anything. If I did not grow my business, number one, there is nothing that I can do with the money. All right, there is no way that I would go to a grocery store and spend the amount of money that I make. There is no way that I can, if I went and just bought myself like a brand new F-350. If I bought myself a brand new, just to put things in perspective, the amount of money that I make, I can effectively buy myself a brand new F-350 every 2 months cash. If I legitimately felt like just writing a check for it, I could. That's another way to look at it. There is no way to spend this amount of money. It's not possible. Like if I sat in my living room and I had my air conditioner on at 75 degrees when it was 100 degrees outside, and I kept my air conditioner on at 75 degrees 24/7, and it blew my air conditioner up, and I replaced my air conditioner, and it still would not dent the amount of money that I make. Would not even dent it. I don't know how else to put it. There is no other way to spend the money. It's not possible. It is legitimately not possible. The only way that I have logically seen to utilize this amount of capital is to grow my business with it. That's it. That's it. That's the only logical way that I have seen to utilize this capital is to grow my business. That's the only way. All right, at the end of the day, I talk about this, the whole thing, at the end of the day, right? If you're poor, you're going to die poor. I hope you're okay with that because you chose to be poor. You may be lying to yourself and saying that you didn't choose to be poor, but you did. All right, you did. And you should be okay with that because you did it to yourself. All right, if you're poor for a reason. All right, and I've talked about this, the whole thing about this idea, like, when you take a look at what I'm doing, and me, like, when I go out, like, let's say that I'm going to a sale barn, right? This is something I give as a very real life example, and I even talk about the YouTube farmer, right? Like, if you go around and you take a look, you probably have no idea. You probably have no idea what you're looking at, but me, when I take a look at a farm, I can tell you what the balance sheet is within 20 seconds. I can tell you what their balance sheet looks like within 20 seconds. If I talk to the person, the farmer, the farmer who was running the farm, I could tell you how much money they were making or they were losing within 20 seconds, all right? I could tell you. It's not like some debatable thing. All right, it's not like you got some, it's not like it's debatable, all right? It's not debatable. Money is not an opinion, all right? And when I take a look, like me, when I go to a sale barn, let's say I go to a sale barn in the north. Let's say I go to a sale barn in the south. Let's say I go to a sale barn in the northeast. Let's say I go to sale barns all over the place, right? I go to sale barns all over the place, and a lot of these sale barns are in rural areas, all right? A majority of them are in rural areas, all right? And even when I go to those sale barns and I take a look around when I'm going to these sale barns, I have not seen anybody even do 10%. Not 10%. And here's the thing, and it's like, I talk about this, the whole idea, and I'm not being a malicious person when I say this, all right? I am not being a malicious person when I say this. You just need to understand it is what it is. There is a very realistic possibility, and I've talked about this, I don't know exactly how many people on the planet make $30,000 or $40,000 a month, but I'm one of them. I am one of them, and I legitimately managed to do it by myself on a backyard, starting myself a commercial cattle farm. I legitimately managed to do that by myself. And here's the thing. When when I take a look at a farm, right? And let's say I go and I take a look, or, but, you can't help, but, when you're like me, when I'm driving to a sale barn and, I'm driving by a field, I just take a look at it, right? And even if it's on something like YouTube, and I tell the whole thing about this, the YouTube farmer, right? It's like, you probably don't have any idea that, most of you probably don't. Most of you probably have no idea that, a majority of these people are borderline failing all the time. I guarantee it. And here's what I see, when I take a look at someone's farm, if you're bringing in 500-pound animals, and let's say that you are let's just use the commodity markets as a basis for your animals, right? Let's just use the commodity markets as a basis for your animals. If you're bringing in 500-pound animals, right? And you're not even using a lot buyer, you're just buying them yourself. And you're bringing in your 500-pound animals, and you have your 500-pound animals, and your big idea is you're going to raise them to 800 pounds or 1,400 pounds or whatever, and you're going to do that by feeding them your cheap corn, right? You were taking a look at the corn market, and you figured, well, this corn, I'm not really going to make any money on it, so I might as well just chop it all up and feed it to my cattle as silage. Feed it to the cattle as silage, right? That's your big idea. Well, how much are you going to pay for your machinery? All right, this is the kind of stuff that I see. All right, and it's borderline ridiculous to me, and it's borderline pathetic, because it's like you probably don't understand that a lot of these people, they don't, a majority of people, it doesn't matter, they effectively not making it. Effectively, these people are not making it. All right, I don't know how else to put, and just to put things in perspective, I actually make money farming. I make a ballistic amount of money farming, a massive sum. All right, legitimately, like, I don't even know how, I don't even know exactly how much I make a lot. When I farm, I make a massive sum of money, and it's not debatable. I actually do it. All right, and you probably don't understand this, but when I take a look at a farm, it doesn't matter. It could be on YouTube. It could be on the internet. It could be me driving to a sale barn. This is legitimately one of the things that I deal with. I legitimately don't know anybody even doing 10%. When I drive to a sale barn and I take a look, I don't see nobody's doing 10%. When I get on YouTube and I take a look at these farms, a lot of these farms are influencer farms. They're not making any money. I would be willing to bet they're probably even losing money. All right, and they got 1 million subscribers, and they're losing money. And you're probably sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, this looks cool," right? But there's a very realistic possibility that is happening. If you bring, like when I watch a farm and they're bringing in a bunch of 500-pound cattle, right, number one type commodity animals, and their big idea is to raise them to 800 pounds. We're talking about, let's say that you go and you buy yourself a 500-pound animal, and it's a true number one type commodity animal, right? And you're effectively, let's just say you're going to trade the commodity markets. You're effectively going to pay about, $1,900, $2,000 for that animal, okay? So you're going to pay about $2,000 for that animal. And then with the commodity markets where they are right now, if we just trade the commodity markets and you sell them at $800, you'll make $2,500. So that's a $500 margin, right? That's a $500 margin. All right, and then if and everything, right? The whole thing about it, that's a $500 margin, right? That's what you're working with. You're working with a $500 margin, and then you got, and your whole idea for, feeding your animals is that you're just going to put them on a commodity feed stuff, right? You're going to put them on a commodity feed stuff, and you're just going to feed your animals a commodity feed stuff. Well, how much, and just to put things in perspective, even, like right now, feed is very cheap, right? Feed is very cheap. And for me to buy feed, it still costs about 5 to 7 times more for me to buy the feed than it does to grow the grass myself. And the results are about the same. It costs about 7 times more. It costs 5 to 7 times more for me to buy the feed. All right, and let's say that you do go and you whatever, right? But and it's like you take a look at your cornfield, right? And a quarter and 25% of your cornfield is practically worthless. Or let's not say 25%, 10% or whatever, 5%. There's always loss. All right, this whole idea that, you know, if you're going to plant, you know, you're going to harvest 100% of your corn, that it doesn't, or your crop, it doesn't work out. All right, so let's say you lost whatever 5 to 10% of your crop, not even worth harvesting it, right? And then you got your silage chopper, and then you got your, you know, you got your whatever, you got your you know, your grain storage, and you got your everything, right? And you got all this machinery, you got a you know, you got a tractor, and you got, you know, all of this stuff, right? And you got your combine and everything, right? Or I mean, I guess, you know, maybe you don't need a combine, you're chopping it for silage, you know, and you got all this stuff, right? And now you have to pay for all your machinery, you know, and you're bringing in your animals at 500. You know, to me, you know, I actually know how to do this stuff, and it's not, you know, and it's not, to me, it's like, well, I mean, I hope you're okay with the idea of barely making it by your entire life. You're effectively trading commodities, and you have a bunch of machinery. I mean, I hope you're okay with the idea of you're not going to really make it very far your entire life. You know, the thing about it is, when I show you my farm, you have to understand that I make a ballistic amount of money. Massive sums of money farming. I don't know how else to put it. When I farm, my farm makes me a massive sum of money, and it's not debatable. All right, it's not, you know, this is not some debatable thing. My farm makes me a massive sum of money. This right here, what you're looking at, right, you know, it's a very good opportunity to take a look at the cattle. This is also what I mean by all of my cattle are effectively about the same weight. I do have, you know, like 1, 2, and I have another that Brayford animal. I have 2 or 3 animals that are a little bit smaller, but I also have 2 or 3 animals, like you can see when you take a look at that red animal over there, you can see he's a little bit bigger than the rest of them. I do have a couple of animals that are smaller, but I also do have a couple of animals that are a bit bigger. All right, so all of these animals are effectively about the same weight. All right, and I would anticipate that when I liquidate my animals, right, it will take me, I don't know. Okay, and here's another way to look at it. So if I liquidate 7 animals a month, and let's just say I got 35, I have 34, but let's just say I have 35. If I have 35 animals and I liquidate 7 animals a month, how long will it take for me to liquidate my 35 animals, right? It would take me 5 months. Does that, you know, and if I liquidate 7 animals a month, how much money will I make in terms of cattle? Will I be able to buy more than 7 animals or less? Or will I be able to buy 7? Right, I'll be able to buy more, maybe twice as many. Right, so if I'm selling 7 and I'm buying 14, and it takes me 5 months to liquidate the 35 animals that I have, and I just continue forward with the business plan, and let's say that I have a 15% death loss, right? And then I take, 10% death loss, whatever it may be. You know, I believe that I can push my death loss numbers down by starting metaphylaxis treatment again. I saw a spike in death loss when I stopped metaphylaxis. And I will continue. I will restart the metaphylaxis program. Okay, I may even give a second dose of antibiotics as a metaphylaxis. All right, and so but I mean, it just is what it is. You have to, the whole thing about this is like, and at the end of the day, I actually did it. All right, if this was easy, everybody would be doing it. Nobody cares about your opinion. If you have a bunch of opinions and you have nothing to show for it, you're practically homeless, I guarantee it. It's not funny. All right, when I show you what I'm doing, you have to understand that this is real life. I actually do it. And when you're taking a look at what I'm doing, you should also understand that when I farm, I make a massive sum of money. When I farm, I legitimately make a massive sum of money. It just is what it is. I'm not an influencer. I'm not an influencer. I don't care. Farming makes me a massive sum of money. I actually make money farming. And the thing about this is, if I legitimately had nothing, I could just redo everything in 30 seconds. What would it matter to me? But I mean, then that's the whole thing. Like me, it doesn't matter. I mean, if I go on YouTube and I take a look around, if I'm driving to the sale barn and I take a look around, it's like you're probably not going to make it. Most people, if not almost everybody, you're not even going to make it to the 10% mark at the rate that you're growing. At the rate that you're going, you're not even going to make it to the 10% mark. Even if you live to be 5,000, you won't. If anything, a lot of people are even going the complete wrong direction. I hope you're okay with being poor for the rest of your life, because you chose to do that. All right, it's not like you sat there and you went, oh, here's my chance to do better. I'm gonna start, working on doing. And I've always said that if you only have one deal your entire life, if you only have one good deal your entire life, and you just sit there and you understand your deal and you stick with it no matter what, even when it gets hard, because you have to understand there is a reason why nobody makes it. It's very difficult, extremely difficult, borderline like 0% success rate. Even if you only had one deal your entire life and you understood that deal and you stuck with it no matter what, you didn't care what anybody thought, you were going to stick with your deal because your deal, you have taken a look at it and it makes sense to you, and you're not on some delusional fantasy. Even if that was all you did your entire life, if all you did your entire life was buy the S&P 500, if that was all you did your entire life, you just bought the S&P 500, eventually you would get to a point where the money would not matter anymore. You don't need $10 million, all right? If you legitimately if you just had one deal, and the one deal, and I've always said, use a good equitable asset, right? When it comes to investing money, use a good equitable asset. Don't use some obscure thing that nobody know. It's like some obscure thing. Use a good equitable asset. All right, find something with a lot of money in it. Find a good equitable asset, and then invest your money in it. And when you invest your money in it and you pay the appraisal value of the asset, you are trading your money for the asset. You're not even buying anything. You're not even spending any money. You're just trading your money for the asset. And the reason that you do that is to make a positive return on your capital. That's it. If all you did your entire life, you don't need to become a 1 in 10. Like when you take a look at me, I may be the only person on the entire planet that does something like this. The only one. It's borderline a miracle that I started myself a cattle farm on a 10.5 acre field and started making myself $30,000-$40,000 a month. That is borderline a miracle. Borderline a miracle. I mean, I don't know anybody even doing 10%. All right, you don't need to become this to make enough money to where, money effectively after about $15,000 a month, money doesn't do anything. And I've spoken about this. The whole idea of my situation is that even, let's say that, let's say that I ran my cattle business and then I went and I fried chicken at Wingstop. This is a very realistic idea of what an investment portfolio looks like. If I just did this and I went and fried chicken at Wingstop, I would still borderline make $15,000 a month cash. That's how, I would, even then. All right, when I take a look at the total revenue of my business, I also need to include the fact that I have animals at home that I did not liquidate that have gone up in value and are stabilized. When I put it all together, I make somewhere between 30 and 40 grand. If I legitimately needed more money, I could just pay myself more. But I don't pay myself. I only, when I take a look at what I'm doing, granted that I am not forced liquidating, if my assets have effectively appreciated to a maximum value and I believe that I cannot make money on my assets anymore, I liquidate, and that is called a forced liquidation. Granted that I am not forced liquidating, right? I effectively just pay myself whatever it is that I need. If I think that I need $25,000 for the month, then I will pay myself 25 grand. If I believe I need 15 grand for the month, I will pay myself 15 grand. If I believe I need $40,000 for the month, I will pay myself $40,000. And here's the thing. When I have a balance sheet and I believe that the balance sheet is still appreciating profitably, what is that value of gain called? What is that gain of value called? It's called an unrealized gain. And as long as I am objectively straightforward about it, then I can utilize that as capital and I can leverage against it. If I legitimately needed more money, I don't ever think about needing more money. I have plenty of money. The amount of money that I'm making is going upwards rapidly, exponentially. I make an immense amount when I farm. You have to, and I've been saying this even 5 times in this video. When you watch me farm, you need to understand that when I farm, I make a massive sum of money. I actually make money farming, a massive sum of money. It is like borderline phenomenal, incredible. I may be the only person on the entire planet that does something like this. The only one. I make a massive sum of money farming. It's borderline astronomical. All right, that's what you're looking at. And this is not an opinion. Money is not an opinion. All right, if you're poor, you're going to die poor. And I hope you're okay with that because you chose to do so. All right, and at the end of the day, if you legitimately wanted to turn yourself around, I mean, I would be happy if you did. I would honestly be happy for you. I'm being completely sincere about it. Because there is no reason to be poor for your entire life. Why would you choose to do that to yourself? I don't know. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. Oh my God, I tried and it was too hard. So, everything, I just gave up. I don't want to know. Oh my God, well, I thought everything was impossible and I didn't have the money. Okay, well, die poor. If I had $5,000, I could turn that $5,000 into $100,000 by starting myself a cattle farm very quickly, and I would do it with a 100% guarantee. That's the difference between me and if you're poor, that's the difference between me and you. All right, and I've already said, the whole thing, if you're poor, you're going to die poor. I can almost guarantee it doesn't matter why it's happened. Oh my God, well, I didn't have the money. Well, have fun dying poor. You don't need money. You need to understand an asset. If you only had one asset your entire life and you stuck with it no matter what, and it was a good asset, that was all you did your entire life, was you just accumulated that one asset. After a certain point, you would never worry about money again. If all you did your entire life was buy the S&P 500, after a certain point, you will never worry about money again. All right, if you went out and you found yourself a one real estate deal, and this real estate deal was whatever, it was whatever, right? It was a multi-unit building, and it was 90% occupancy, and the rent hadn't gone up in 5 years, and the building hadn't been remodeled in 10 years, and it's being held by some investment company that has held onto it for the last 30 years, or sometimes you even find someone like a real old man, or every once in a while you'll even find somebody who is desperate for money. They put themselves in a financial hole. Every once in a while, you'll see this too, all right? Every once in a while, you'll find somebody who just put themselves in a miserable financial situation and they are desperate for money, and you can probably even make a deal with them. All right, and you found yourself one deal your entire life. You appraised it properly, and you had a realistic idea for what your positive return was going to be, and you had a good asset. If you only did one your entire life, and that was all you did, if that was all you did, even then, you would effectively get to a point where you would never worry about money again. Guarantee it. You only need one asset. You only need one deal. After that, if you legitimately, and I've already talked about this, like the whole thing about me, I make a ballistic sum of money. I don't want a Lamborghini. I don't want to go on a vacation. I don't want, I don't want Gucci clothing. I don't want, maybe I buy, one day I'll buy myself a nice suit. Whenever I feel like if I need a nice suit, I'll buy myself a nice suit. But other than that, I don't, there is, I don't really want, I don't want the whatever, right? I don't want the Lamborghini, and I don't want to go on a vacation. I honestly don't want to go on a vacation. All right, I don't want to go on a vacation. I don't want to go and buy drugs. Nothing. I don't want to go to a casino, no nothing. I legitimately just want to grow my business. But, if you only had one deal your entire life, and it was a good deal, and you understood your deal, and you were going to make you understood that you were going to make a positive return on your capital. If you only had one deal your entire life and you stuck to it no matter what, you stuck to it, and then after a certain point you would never worry about money again. You realistically, in terms of the modern day economy, from what I have seen, if you bring home $15,000 a month, you can effectively do anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It is effectively unlimited money. If the whole thing about $15,000 a month is that if you had $10,000 a month and you lived on $10,000 a month and you took your $5,000 and you just invested it in the S&P 500, and you were investing in the S&P 500 because you fundamentally believed in the asset. The asset is a good asset. It doesn't matter what the price is. It's just a good asset, so I'm going to buy it. And you did that for the rest of your life. You would make a return on your money. The S&P 500 gives you a 1.2% dividend. There is technically no way that you can lose money on the S&P 500 if you do not sell it. It's not possible. Because why? The stock produces a dividend. If in the S&P 500, the fundamental basis of the S&P 500, it is that it is a broader, you are buying the broader equities market. You are buying a small portion equity stake in the 500 biggest companies in the world, in America. That is what you're buying. It is a good asset. And if you fundamentally understood that and you said, well, that is the asset that I want to invest in, and you just started putting money in that, you didn't care what the price was, you just simply did it because you understood that you were buying a good asset. Then after a certain point, you won't, every year you will be giving yourself a bit of a raise. You won't ever have to worry about money again. After a certain point, that's how it pans out. All right, and when and I don't exactly know how many people, like, if you make 30, because I've always said money's not an opinion, and I actually do it. I make about $30,000-$40,000 a month. If you make $30,000-$40,000 a month, or I don't know how many people do, and here's the thing about me making $30,000-$40,000 a month, that's how much money I bring home. That's my take-home pay. I've already spoken about this. If I bring home $30,000 and I take that $30,000 and I invest the entirety of the sum into a tax-deductible asset that is equitable, and I have an idea for how I will appreciate the asset, then I can keep all of the money that I make and I grow my wealth tax-free. I don't make the rules. If you don't like the, don't hate the player, right? That's the old saying. Don't hate the player. I don't make the rules. All right, and I've been speaking about this from what I understand. This is the only way to legitimately accumulate wealth. This is effectively how everybody has done it. It's not just me. Everybody has done it like this, from what I know. Effectively, everybody. Granted that you're not like, you're not like, scheming, right? You're not like, coming up, I know that people steal money. There are people that steal money. There are people that, come up with ridiculous schemes, but the only legitimate way of making money, from what I have seen, the only legitimate way of making money, from what I understand, if you have a better idea, I would love to know what it is. But from my understanding, the only legitimate way of making large sums of money is via assets and positive returns on capital. That's the only way that I have seen it. I don't know any other way. In terms of legitimately making money. All right, because there are illegitimate ways of making money, and I do not encourage that. All right, at the end of the day, I don't make the rules. If I make money and I take my money and I purchase a tax-deductible asset and I appreciate the value of the asset has gone up in value. I don't have to pay taxes on any of that money because the asset itself was tax-deductible. And until I pay myself, that money that I have made is an unrealized gain. But understand this, when I farm, when you watch me farm, you have to understand that I make a ballistic amount of money farming, legitimately farming, just farming. I make a massive sum of money. And just to put things in perspective, I don't know anybody. I honestly don't know anybody that makes 30 or 40. I don't know anybody. If you legitimately, but here's the thing. You have to take the entirety of my situation into account. I make this money by starting my own businesses by myself. I can legitimately do this anytime that I want. Legitimately at any point. If I legitimately even lost all of this, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter to me. All right, as far as I know, I'm the only one that can do that. There are other people that can do that, and I've spoken about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, when I see how Warren Buffett makes money, when I listen to Warren Buffett talk about making money, and I listen to his financial strategies, I believe that Warren Buffett could do it as well. Warren Buffett could also intentionally make money with money. I would be willing to bet. But it's not a massive list of people. It's not like 10% of the population can do this. It's borderline 0%. Borderline zero. All right, and I've seen people make money, and I've seen what people say when they talk about money. I've heard what people have to say when they talk about money, and the only real person that I know that I legitimately believe could do something like intentionally make money with capital, even if they had nothing, they could redo it all again, is Warren Buffett. I don't personally know anybody else. There are people, but there are people, and actually, I take that back. I watch some people on YouTube, and they're in commercial real estate, and they're business acquisition, and these people, they could probably do it as well. They probably could, all right? They probably could do it as well. But the big name on the list is Warren Buffett. I think Warren Buffett could do it. I've listened to how he communicates about money. I've listened to what he communicates his ideas about money are. I've listened to him, and I believe that Warren Buffett could do it as well. But it's not some massive list of people. It's not like 10% of the population. It's not even 1%. It's probably not even 0.001%. It's practically nobody. I could probably put all of these people on less than 10 people. Less than 10. And I am one of them. If I had nothing, I could redo everything in 30 seconds. I make ballistic amounts of money. I don't know how else to put it. I make massive quantities of money. When you take a look at what I'm doing, and I show you what I got going on, I would be willing to bet that this business produces enough revenue, it produces enough income to grow the business by more than 50% just by reinvesting my earnings in the next 3 months. 3-4 months, something like that. I would be willing to bet. When I farm, you have to understand that it just is what it is. When I farm, I make massive sums of money. Honest to God. All right? I'm not lying about it. I'm not being a malicious person about it. And you have to understand, like me, when I take a look at a farm, I could tell you what it's not even just a farm, right? It's a balance sheet. It's whatever. You could show me a stock, and I'd probably just tell you, I wouldn't touch the thing. Bitcoin, I wouldn't touch the thing. Coca-Cola, that's a good dividend stock. S&P 500, that's a good stock. Right? But that's, don't invest in some obscure thing unless you thoroughly understand what you're doing. Like if you're Warren Buffett and you find some obscure company that has a good balance sheet, then sure, invest in it. But don't go and buy some penny stock thinking that it's going to go to the moon. Okay, don't buy some obscure Bitcoin thing that thinking it's going to go to the moon. All right, if you only have you have to fundamentally understand this idea that if you only have one asset that you understand, like me, I only have one asset that I understand, and that is farming. That's it. I'm a cattleman until the day that I'm a cattleman forever. There is only one asset that I understand, and that is cattle. That's it. All right, I'm a cattleman forever. That's what I do. And it makes me a massive sum of money. If you only understand one asset forever, if you only understand one asset, that one asset will effectively be enough to effectively push you out of financial poverty forever. It will be. Granted that you stick with it no matter what, because you have to understand if everybody could do it, everybody would be doing it. But at the end of the day, almost nobody makes it. As far as I know, it's actually closer to 0% than it is 0.01%. If I took all of the people that I legitimately just found, and it's not like, I found these people on the internet and I found them on YouTube and I watched their interviews and things. If I legitimately put everybody that I found I could put everybody on my 2 hands. It would be less than 10 people. And I am one of them. All right. If I legitimately had nothing, I could make massive sums of money very quickly. And I'm telling you, if you just have one asset, if you only understand one asset and you only have one asset your entire life, as long as you stick with it and it is a good asset, it will generate you enough money to not worry about money anymore. You will be able to do it with just that one asset. You know, you only need one. You don't need 10, 15, 20 things. If you only have one asset, that's it. All right, but you have to understand that at the end of the day, you know, if I were going to put everybody that I knew that can do something like this, if I was going to put everybody that I knew, it would be less than 10 people. Less than 10. It's not some massive number of people that can do something like this. It's not like, oh my God, 5% of the population can do this. It's not. It's probably closer to 0% than it is 0.001%. It probably is. It's not some massive number of people. Even if I had nothing, I could start everything. I could redo everything in 30 seconds. It doesn't matter to me. You know, when you watch me farming, you have to understand that, I actually make money farming. I make a massive sum of money farming. Massive. I mean, I don't even know anybody else that can just go out on their own and start a business and make $30,000, $40,000 a month with a 100% guarantee. I don't know anybody else that can do it other than me. The only other people that I know that can do it are like Warren Buffett. All right, and maybe a handful of other people that I have seen on the internet, but that's it. I don't know anybody else. Not a single person. All right, that's effectively, that's the situation that I'm in. I legitimately don't know anybody. All right, other than, people that I have, if I've watched their interview or if I've, seen how they do things, every once in a while I'll find somebody like in commercial real estate or in business acquisition, and Warren Buffett is in stocks, every once in a while in equities, and every once in a while I will find somebody. But it's not like 1% of the population of the earth. It's not even like 0.01%. It's like borderline 0%, maybe less than 5. Less than 10 people. All right, if you only have one asset and you accumulate that asset for your entire life and it's a good asset and it makes you a positive return and you understand your asset, that one asset is all you need. All right, that's at the end of the day, and if you decide to go further than that, like me, I have decided to go further. I have decided to, reinvest my capital. If I sat here and I spent whatever, $15,000 a month, if I sat here and spent $15,000 a month for the rest of my life, I mean, it wouldn't matter, right? But I have chosen to grow my business, all right? I have chosen to do better for myself. I have chosen to grow my business. I have chosen to do so, right? Don't choose to be poor. I say this all the time. Don't choose to be poor. Choose to do better for yourself. I have chosen to go further. I have chosen to expand my business, all right? I am working on it, and realistically, within the next 3 months or so, I will have generated myself an astronomical sum of capital. All right, I am just flat out saying it. All right, I'm just flat out saying it. I'm not bragging about it. I'm not whatever about it. I am just telling you it is what it is. I'm just telling you the truth. In the next 3 months, I will have generated myself an astronomical sum of capital. All right, and my balance sheet will be going vertical exponentially. All right, the amount of money that I make will actually go higher very rapidly. And I may actually end up more than doubling my income by the end of the year. All right, my income will go higher very quickly, and I'm just saying that it is a statement of a fact. If anything happens along the way, if anything happens between point A and point B, if anything happens that causes that to change, I will say so. But right now, I am on track and things are going well, all right?